Welcome. This is Raina Nice, your host of A Season of Caring podcast, where we share stories of hope for family caregivers, breaking through the busyness and loneliness of caregiving to see God even in this season. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to our special guest, Ramona Torres. Ramona is a devoted daughter, wife, mother, and grandmother with a deep passion for sharing her faith and encouraging others. A native of Newark, New Jersey, she has dedicated her life to serving her community through her various ministries. Ramona, the founder and host of Girlfriends Talking, a platform that fosters connection and support among women. She's also recently started a chapter of Save One, Abortion Recovery, to provide healing and hope. In addition to her work at a local jail, where she serves as treasurer and is a committee member at the Franklin County Jail, Ramona facilitates Bible studies to share the love of God. Through her work, she continues to make a meaningful impact on the lives of those that she serves. Welcome, Ramona. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here with you.
Well, start out by introducing us to your dad and tell us a little bit about what that caregiving season looked like for you.
Oh, goodness. So my dad, his name was Angel. Everybody knew him as Manuel or Manny. Oh, he was an amazing father, amazing husband, amazing grandfather, best friend to my husband. And taking care of him after an accident, he fell and broke a femur bone and just didn't really recover after that. About 15 months, I took care of him in my home. The last week of his life, we decided to put him on hospice for pain management. What I thought was going to be for pain management, and little did I know, we put him on hospice Monday night, and Sunday afternoon, actually, he was gone. And so that was hard.
Yeah, so hard. Our timing is not God's timing, is it? Because we would never let go if we had a choice.
It's not. I never thought that at such an early age, 55, so I guess I would have been 53, that I would not have my father around forever. You know, sometimes we take our parents for granted. We don't realize that when God says their time is up, there's nothing that we can do to stop that.
Yeah. It's so hard for our hearts to be prepared for that. You know, when I think of that and I think of the grief that comes along with losing parents, I always just remind myself that we have never known life without them. And so it's normal for us to not be able to understand what it's like because they've always been a part of our lives. And so we don't expect to have to live without them, though that's the normal. They're older. It's going to happen. We just aren't ready for it.
Absolutely. I don't think anyone is ever ready for that. Knowing family members have passed before, like grandparents and aunts and uncles and people in our community is one thing, but I think it hits home when it's a parent. I kind of felt like I had an orphan spirit, although I know, God has not left me nor forsaken.
Yes.
Me. He's my father, but I kind of felt like an orphan there for a little bit. And then life goes on. People go on. I went back to work and there was work to do. And I remember sitting at my desk just crying, like, what's going on here? Like, am I expected to be, back at work? And so I remember sitting at my desk for days after he passed and I went back to work. I took probably about 2 weeks off. I remember sitting at my desk just crying and thinking and, life goes on. But meanwhile, you're kind of just stuck in your grief.
Yeah, it's tough. And even in times of caregiving, there's that grief of what they can't be, what they once were. I know with him, with that leg break, that really changed what his life looked like and how you were supporting him before then. There's different seasons of it, and it definitely looks different, but there's grief in each piece of it, I think.
Yes. After that fall, my dad had a car accident in 2001, and he survived that by the grace of God. He was in the hospital for 11 and a half months.
Wow.
And so people were surprised that he survived that. But I can see the hand of God in that process. My father then gave his life to the Lord and passed away. And so we moved him from New Jersey to Maryland, from Maryland to Pennsylvania. He helped me raise my daughter. My daughter understands and speaks Spanish today, thanks to my dad. And when she was old enough to kind of fend for herself and he didn't have to take her to school anymore or drop things off at the school or show up for functions at the school when I couldn't, he decided to go to Puerto Rico and care for some of his siblings. And so he was caretaker for his siblings and for a brother-in-law until they all finally passed. He has two sisters in New York, one in a nursing home in the Bronx, one in Brooklyn, and then one brother left in Puerto Rico. And so when the last sister passed away, we said, Dad, we think it's time for you to come home because we can tell that his health was declining. And he wasn't quite ready to come back to the cold weather in Pennsylvania. And give me a couple more months, and I promise you that I'll call you so that you can get my airline ticket. And that never happened because 23rd, I got a phone call. He had fallen. And I got a call at work from my dad's telephone. And I said, hello, hello, hello. And there was nothing. I could hear the wind and I could hear it's passing. And the phone had fallen out of his hand when he tried to call me. And so it was too far for him to be able to talk into the phone. And so I couldn't hear him and he couldn't hear me. And I thought, oh, it was one of those calls, mistake calls. Surely he'll call me back. And when I called him, the line was busy. And then I knew something wasn't right. And on my way from work to my home, my brother called me and says, hey, have you heard from Dad? And I said, well, it's funny. He called me today. And I think it was one of those butt calls. And he said, no, it was Dad. He fell and he broke his femur bone. And they're taking him for surgery as we speak. And so that was December 23rd. And my brother made me make a promise. He said, I'll fly out on Christmas Day, but you have to get there because I'm not changing any diapers. And I said, bet we've got this. I could change a diaper. And so I flew out December 31st and we were with my dad until January 15th that they were able to remove his sutures. And then we flew back to Pennsylvania. From there, he went into a rehab for 25 days. And then we brought him home. And And so my dad's story was one of a man that loved his family, gave his life to the Lord, became an evangelist at the end of his life, talking to everyone, family members, friends, even his ex-wife, my mother, about giving her life to Christ. And so it's an honor to be able to share his story with you.
I love that. That's so amazing. So share with us a favorite caregiving story. Here he is living in your home and you're needing to take care of him in a way you never imagined. Share something with us about him.
Oh, goodness. And taking care of him, we had a lot of moments. So there's this one time where he looks over to me and he smiles and he says, I never thought that you would be the one taking care of me in the end of my life. I was the youngest of 4 and I was a surprise baby. They had 3 children with my mom. They had just purchased a home and they weren't planning on having any more children, but the Lord had other plans. My mother lost her birth control and found out she was pregnant, shared with my dad. And so when he shares the story that, you were the child that we didn't want or that we didn't know we needed. And it's funny how life is because God knew that you would be the one taking care of me.
That's so amazing. I love how God knows how to provide. And so many times as caregivers, we find ourselves one of many children, and not everyone responds the same to caregiving and the need for care with our parents. And so it's a blessing that he had you and that he definitely was able to rely on you in those last days.
Thank you. Thank you. It was an honor. The Bible, there's a scripture that says, honor your mother and your father in the Lord. And my parents are from Puerto Rico. And so we literally take that you honor your parents. And so most of us don't believe in nursing homes. And I know it's not easy. And I know that it's not the case where everyone can afford to do that, right? And so if your parent is in a nursing home, I don't want you to feel guilty. You have to do what's best for your family. But for us, keeping him home was definitely something that God laid on our heart. And he equipped us because we did it. And thanks to my brother and thanks to my husband and my children, they all helped out and pitched in when they could.
So tell us, what would be one thing you would say was most surprising about that caregiving role for you?
The most surprising. Well, initially, I thought, okay, this is something that I got to do because I'm his daughter, right? It's my responsibility. But over time, it became what I would say a journey of learning. I learned patience. Sometimes it wasn't easy to care for my dad. There were times where he couldn't make it to the bathroom. And so we would have accidents. And those accidents can be a lot on him, on me. Empathy. I learned that, growing old is not easy.
Yes.
I learned unconditional love from my father because here was, this man that I knew him to be 6'2", 250 pounds, shrink away to, if he was 112 pounds was a lot. He was definitely all
Wow.
skin and bones. And so it was hard to see. Very hardworking, great work ethic. He taught us work ethic. My dad didn't believe in taking a break. He was always doing something around my home, cutting grass, trimming the bushes. He would cook for us. I mean, anything that we needed done, he would do out of love. And so it was a journey for me to learn to be patient with him. There was times where he would get a urinary tract infection and his mind would
Mm.
go crazy. And then
Yes.
this is it. I'm losing my dad. Does he have Alzheimer's? Does he have dementia? Like, what's going on? And, obviously I take him into the emergency room, and that's how I learned that a UTI could do that. But
Yeah.
it was a journey. I thought I had it all together. And there were days where I'd become frustrated and I'd lose my patience. And so I would say that was a time that I learned a lot. The challenges, there were moments that were frustrating. There were moments that were overwhelming. There were moments where I'm thinking, where are my siblings? I shouldn't be doing this on my own.
Yeah.
Um, but the connection was the biggest thing for me. I was able to connect with my father in a way that I had never connected with him before.
Yeah.
Moments. He shared his life with me. He shared stories. At the end of life, material things don't mean anything, right? Uh,
Right.
him was his children, his grandchildren, his great grandchildren. He desired to be with family. So it taught me a lot about myself. It taught me that I am resilient, right? It taught me the true meaning of selfless love. And it was just a humbling experience that just surprises me every day that I was able to go through it, because there were days where it was tough. God got us through it.
Well, that's a perfect question. My next question is, share with us one time specifically when you just knew God really showed up for you in the middle of it.
Oh, goodness gracious. When he showed up for me, well, I have to say the entire time taking care of my dad, I know that it was the hand of God. At the end of my dad's life, I put him in hospice on a Monday. Saturday night, he woke up, and because he had gone into a deep sleep. Saturday, he woke up and he said, Ramona, or Mona, he called me Mona. He said, Mona, I'm dying. For him to know that, to me, if you don't believe that there's a God, I don't know what else to tell you. But he
Yeah.
got up and he said, Mona, I'm dying. Take care of the blanket. It was a knitted blanket that the nurses had given him. They had prayed over it. And he looked over at my husband and he fist bumped him and said, I love you. This was a thing they did at night, every night before they went to sleep.
Oh,
They would tell each other that they loved each other. And then he laid back and he fell asleep. Sunday morning, when I woke up and I went to check on him, I noticed his color wasn't right and his breathing was heavy. And I knew that something wasn't right. So run up to take a shower, tell my husband to keep an eye on him. And I said, Lord, don't let him suffer. But if you're going to take him today, let me be with him when he takes his last breath. And I can almost see the hand of God just like writing, got you, Ramona. You'll be at it. And sure enough, I had my shower, changed, came down, had some friends that had come to visit my dad and said, let me go check on my dad and I'll be back. And I noticed that his mouth was dry. And I took a little bit of water with a little scrubby thing that the nurses left for me.
Mhm.
Looked like a straw with a little sponge at the end. And I wiped his mouth and my dad took 2 breaths and passed. And so I knew in that moment, God had been with me the whole time. But that day when he heard my heart, don't let my father die. Although I know he wouldn't be dying by himself because obviously God was with him. But when I asked him, let me be with him when he takes his last breath, he granted me that wish. And so, yeah, that would be.
Yeah. He's so faithful, even in the hard. It is so hard, but it's such a blessing to see the faithfulness of God and to be able to remind everyone else who's wherever they are in their season that he's right there with them and he is listening to those prayers and those things that we ask of him. So thank you for encouraging us with that.
Yes.
What would be one thing that you could share with us of how you live content, love well, or care without regrets?
So I would say since my dad's passing, his taking care of him and passing, I've learned a lot in life. Life is short. We're not promised tomorrow. We know these things, but until
Yeah.
you watch a loved one pass and you get to live the last season of their life, things start to click. And so in the midst of any challenges now, I just try to just take time to just pause and reflect on the blessings that God has given me. You know, my home, my husband, my children, my grandchildren, the fact that I can wake up today breathing and I have a breath in my lungs and that God still has a purpose and a plan for me today, right? And
Mhm.
small things, the opportunities to be present for loved ones, the times that I could just pick up the phone and just call someone and give them a word of encouragement. You know, I try to maintain a positive outlook on life. I try to stay grounded. I try to approach each day with a sense of purpose and appreciation for those around me. My father had a best friend, Don Luis Vega, who was like a father to us. And so when my dad passed, I made it a point to go to New Jersey to visit him in the nursing home a couple occasions and to call him on Sundays to let him know that he was loved, that he was wanted, that he was needed, that he was cared for. And so I'm more intentional now.
Mhm.
After my grandfather passed away, shortly after my grandmother passed away. And so I try to be intentional with relationships now. It just reminds me that we're on a journey and we could choose to focus on the good. We could choose to focus on the bad. I'm choosing to focus on loving and in growing every day in my love for others, for my family members, for people in my community, and just reminding folks that, you know, there's older people in nursing homes that maybe don't have family members that visit.
Mhm.
Go out and visit someone at a nursing home, you know, pick up that phone, call someone and let them know that, especially the older people, right? They're so wise. I love to sit with older people. They're so wise. There's so many stories that one day we won't hear anymore. And like with my father, you know, he would repeat some stories and I'd heard them before and like I'd never heard them before.
Yeah.
And that's what you do. And so, yeah.
Well, that's so important. And I agree. It causes us to be more intentional. And in the middle of caregiving, sometimes it can be hard to remember that because there are so many things to do and so many people that need us. But it's one of those things that we can really learn to be intentional and to think about what's most important and to let the things that aren't go. That's the things you're not going to worry about later. You're going to be so thankful you have the things that you have focused on and that you know that are important to you.
Absolutely.
So, what would be one last thing that you would like to share with other caregivers?
Oh, goodness gracious. I would say the importance of setting boundaries. I didn't do that with, when I was taking care of my dad, I was working and financially we could afford for me not to work. I felt like I had to be there at work, which I know someone else could have done the job, right? To set boundaries. That's one thing I didn't do when I was taking care of my dad. Besides boundaries, the importance of getting rest, the importance of asking for help, getting other people to help, delegating tasks, not feeling like you have to do this by yourself.
Yeah. So important. Boundaries are hard. I think they're hard to see. They're hard for us, especially with caring hearts. We just want to be able to do everything for everyone. And I think it's funny when you said that somebody else could do my job. We always think we're irreplaceable, don't we? The
Yeah.
sad thing is, once we aren't in our job anymore, somebody does take care of it. But nobody else can be the daughter. Nobody else can provide the same kind of care and relationship that you do with your loved ones. So it is so important to really, again, that's the intentional piece to really be able to step back and say, this is the most important thing right now. And I'm always encouraging us as caregivers to realize that this will not go on forever, and so there is an after in your caregiving, and that after has plenty of time and space for you to do the things that maybe you don't have a chance to do while you're caregiving.
Yes, absolutely. And then the other thing is it's okay to grieve the loss of your
Mhm.
loved one. I was able, after 3 weeks of not wanting to do anything, not wanting to go anywhere, just sitting in my family room and just really mourning the loss of my dad. There's a program called Grief Share, and I'm sure you probably heard of it. Yeah. at my local church. I went to grief share, and I think the first 3 classes, I sat there and just cried. And the girls were so sweet. They put a box of Kleenex in front of me and allowed me to cry. I didn't have to say anything. And then I think after the 3rd visit, I finally opened up and was able to share. There was one woman who had lost her husband, her father-in-law, and I think her dad, all back to back.
Wow.
My goodness, sometimes you think you have it bad and there's somebody that has it worse. And we were able to just share and love each other and encourage each other and just be there for each other. And it was one of the greatest classes or programs that I've ever been part of. And so I highly suggest and recommend that. In fact, I facilitate a class of grief share at our local jail as well, because there's all types of grief, right? And so, yeah. And so
That's great. Yes, I thank you for that encouragement, because grief share is one that I recommend over and over again to people that I work with, because it is such a powerful group of people come together and they just meet the need in that moment. And so it's definitely such a blessing. And I'm glad that you're able to give back, even as we are always learning how to live this life without our loved one. It's not something that we really figure out. It's ongoing learning, right? But it's still an opportunity to then share that compassion with others and to encourage them to take the next step. And that's pretty much all we can do.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, Ramona, thank you so much for joining us on a Season of Caring podcast today and just sharing your story of caring for your dad and what a blessing he was to you and to so many others. We love to be able to learn about him.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Listeners, thank you for joining us today for Stories of Hope from Ramona. Season of Caring podcast has been created to share stories of hope for living content, loving well, and caring without regrets. If you have legal, financial, or medical questions, be sure to consult your local professionals and take heart in your season of caring.